And out of nowhere, Exosister takes down the YCS? I'll make 30% of you that have not smashed the living crap out of that subscribe button. Smash it so you guys don't miss out more Oz content. This is one of the most remote events that we've ever seen in terms of breakdown here. So we had 8 cash Tira in your top 32, which is actually pretty amazing when you look at like how much of this format is, because usually you're seeing like a huge representation of this. I mean, 1/4 of the event is still pretty up there, but it's not a 50%er like we've seen here a lot. Now, following it up here was Dragon Link. Dragon Link, I think, took a lot of people by surprise this weekend as it showcased a relatively interesting showing out here. Many players out here repping this deck. It was actually very nice to see. We also had 3 Sprite for hire decks. Now, the for hire variant has been like the massive one that's been taking off as of late. Deck is like crazy good. And we also had 3 Flaunderies players. Flaunder also came out of this weekend here. A lot of people kind of looking around going, wait, what's going on here, Robbie? Like, where did Flunder come from? It's a relevant deck again. We also had double Sun Avalon Rika decks showing up too. So the Plant Good stuff kind of back at it again, showcasing to us that, hey, you know, the deck never really left. It's back again doing its thing. Now for the one-up section, we had one Purely deck making its way through the top cut, which is very interesting to see that that was holding on. We had a Plunder Runic deck as well, which we'll talk about later this afternoon. We also had Melfi sprites. Technically, you had 4 sprite variations in Top Cut. We had a Mathmech Adagnister deck, which that one came out of nowhere too. We had Shadal Tier Elements. We had Super Heavy Samurai. We had 1 Branded. We had Exosister as well, Labyrinth, Sky Striker, and Vanquish Soul. So all of the rogue decks, like this proves like how good the format can actually be when you're looking at like the super top end heavy of things. Now, all good things must come to an end. Top 16 here. Kashtira still holding on to that 25% grapple that they had on the top cut, which once again, not really surprised about that. 2 Flaunderies duelists still holding on in top cut. M-Pen actually doing its job out here in being a devastating floodgate. Unfortunately, we lost quite a lot of the Dragon Link players out here, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. If you still got 2 holding on, you know, on the top end of things, I don't think that's terrible. Now, the one-ups still continue on here. So we have an Exosister still holding on. Okay. We had Sprite for hire doing its thing. Unfortunately, we lost one of them. Branded still climbing on up here as well. We had Vanquish Soul, Purely, Sun Avalon Rika, Mathmech Adagnister, and our Sky Striker player has managed to, you know, make their way on in to top 16 here as well. Man, when you have that many one-ups doing their job, I think that's particularly interesting. Now we shift on into top 8. This is the beginning of what we're going to call the end of the arc here. 2 Dragon Link duelists still holding on. They advanced. Kashtira lost a lot of its fighting prowess here as we see the deck actually get shoved back down to 25%. Seems to be about the story of this event, was 25% Kashtira. Then you have Flaunderies, Mathmech, Purely, and Exosister. So the rogue trio is still holding on here, doing its thing. In the top 4, you see 25% Kashtira still doing its thing. Mathmech Ignister still doing its thing here. Exosister and Purely round things out up here as well for top 4. And then the finals, as you know it, were Mathmech Ignister versus Exosister. What in the world actually happened here? To see Kashtira not lock down a first place is actually amazing. Let's pass on over to Decklist. Locking down first place here is none other than the Exosister, aka Spirit Extension deck. First thing I noticed that's kind of interesting about this is we're only playing 2 copies of Dimension Shifter. I don't actually know if that was like something crazy tacked out, but it's interesting. Also, goes in match, looking like it's a massive powerhouse for this deck. Another big thing down here, especially when you start looking at like how this build is supposed to play, you have a lot of destruction down in the side deck. A lot of those immediate out cards are going to be able to handle a lot of the situations, so you can, you know, set them to your thing. Also, this is one of the first builds that I think I've seen that are actually on double Zeus. So many people were dedicating just, you know, the one-of slot to the Zeus and kind of calling it a day, but the fact that this deck is taking advantage here of the multitude of different chains to go through. I like that. I also like that we are citing the Solemn Judgment down here as well. I didn't really think I would see Exosister perform, but Variance did its thing here. Next up is our 60-card pile Mathmech good stuff turbo deck. It's going to be the best way that I'm going to say this. You are going through all of the Mathmech loops here, trying to set up, well, I mean, the big Link 6 guy is an incredible monster. Let's be absolutely honest here. Every time I see that monster kind of step into the arena, it's usually going to be good. And especially with Kaiju's not running around anymore, this deck gets literally even freer real estate to set up. It amazes me that, you know, when you see formats like this, where people are like, oh, you know, like, why did this do well? One, people don't know how to handle, you know, multiple extension trees for what Cyber's good stuff can actually do. And all of a sudden there's a Link 6 on the field that they can no longer handle. So this is a good example of we took all of the best elements and stuck them together, and it worked out. Especially people still don't understand how to play against this deck. So very, very, very awesome to see that. Next up here is Purely. Purely actually making its way into Top Cut. We're not even playing a Dark World package in this, and I think it's very interesting to kind of take note here that with how the format has been settling, Purely was a deck that multiple people tossed aside. Now, heading into the NAWCQ here, maybe people will actually maybe be worried about Nors running around. Because one big thing I got out of this event was people were not prepared for super large boss monsters outside of the occasional destructive Daruma cannon that was running around. The fact that, you know, we do have that card to out some of the certain situations that pop up actually is pretty telling to really see. But to be honest with you, outside of, you know, I guess basic innovations out here, I like the one Dark Roll and no more in the main deck, so you can actually thrust into it if you need to. But honestly, this deck looks like it covers a majority of its bases, so good stuff. Top 4. You know, there had to be one Kashtira deck in the Top Cut, and, you know, honestly, I'm not even that mad that this deck, you know, still made its way on up here. Talk about basic stuff. We are only playing one copy of the Scareclaw Kashtira, and no Tier Elements Kashtira whatsoever. We are playing the Dark Holes and Book of Moon, so you do have those typical disruption packages that you're very used to seeing with this deck. And then, of course, I mean, take your flavor of, like, defensive options. You do have Lances in here. We are playing Talents and Pot of Prosperities, all the basic stuff that you could want to see. We're playing double Zeus as well, double Dark Armed as well for cleanup. And then I see that we are playing Goliath as well. Man, I love seeing Goliath actually do its thing. Like, the fact that people still are not prepared for that in the year 2023 after this deck has been meta relevant for how long at this point in time? Oh man, it's interesting. Next up here is our Trishula TTV out here, actually topped with Dragon Link. Actually good to see that they're finding success out here. Now, as for Dragon Link Innovations, 46 cards. All right, that's nothing too particularly crazy. Sometimes you want to go on the top end of things. A massive buy steal package in the main deck so we can still, you know, toggle do our thing. The Red Eyes also climbing up here as well. We are setting the one destructive Daruma cannon, so once again, if your opponent is trying to put pressure on you, you can immediately access some of those good spot removal options so that you can, guess what, attempt to play the game. I don't know what else I'm really supposed to say about this. Dragon Link is pretty streamlined, minus a few of the, I would say, tech choices that you get, but I mean, in this case, it's just, I went ahead and extended out a couple hand traps and found success. So good stuff. Next up over here is the Flunderies deck that made top 8. Now, this is wild to me as well. This build was playing triple Offerings to the Doomed. The last time I saw Offerings to the Doomed seeing play, this was a tech choice that we saw Sky Striker actually playing. And the fact that this deck still is you know, getting the chance to kind of adapt something from Striker is very interesting. Of course, the Harpy's Featherstorm's down here. I see that we are playing one copy of the Tribute spell in the main and one down in the side deck, okay? And then Dimension Shifters have just been kicked down to the side. Dimension Shifter value, it's still good. It's just not as good as it formerly was. That's why, you know, you saw Exosister kind of cutting it down to 2. When it does its job, it wins you free matchups, but the most devastating deck in the room is still Kashtira by about 1,000 miles. So the little things that you got to be, you know, considerate of out here. And then we also had this top 32 Sprite Kashtira deck. Just kidding, it's just triple Fenrir. So this is what we, I guess, classify as Melfi Sprite. What, a whole 2 to 3 cards in the main deck? Yeah. And of course, this build is using the Rite of Armesia package to set up adventure tokens and then lead to that additional level of disruption that you're pretty used to seeing with this deck. If you've been around, you know, the metagame, you have an idea of what's been going on in this deck. All right, the fact that you have so many good option trees available to you. Honestly, it's what makes Sprite such a crazy matchup. Also handing your opponent a Nightmare Corruptor Ibley, them looking at it and going, what in the world am I supposed to do with this? It is not necessarily one of the happiest feelings in the world. So a very, very standard build, to say the least here. But outside of that, I mean, the meta is pretty interesting. We're going to pass on over to one more list we have here. Now, unfortunately, this list got 34th place, but this list piqued my interest, so I wanted to include it here. This is using the Ring of Worm option tree to basically access the Synchro ladder here. But Robbie, he's playing the Sprite package, yes, but this is very reminiscent of some of the idea mentality that the OCG Synchro Ring of Worm deck was actually playing out here. And you do see, of course, Assault Synchron. You gotta love tunings in here as well. So basically, this deck wants to make sure that you can set up into the legendary Big 10 tree here and then start setting up these disruptions. Do not underestimate these 4 level 10 synchros because they are extremely powerful. And if a deck like this starts accessing those particularly large skill trees, you're going to start to see a lot of issues. So I actually think that it's really cool to see that we have a modern era Bysteel Sprite Synchro deck actually kind of being relevant out here. So kind of take note of this. I actually think that this is awesome. So what do you think about the breakdown for this event? Please leave a comment down below, tell me what you guys think, and I will see your beautiful faces back here later today, guys. Peace out. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.